say that you have 4 or 5 minutes per question to get through things. I think you'd be surprised when you're pausing how long you're really pausing for. It probably seems like a long time. So, I mean, you could certainly play with it with a stopwatch and have somebody ask you some just off-the-wall question that you're not quite sure how to answer. And what feels to you like you're pausing for an eternity is probably 10, 15 seconds. And if you're pausing for a really long time or really struggling, they'll say, do you want me to repeat the question? Or, you know, can I rephrase that for you? So they're not just going to sit there and hope to make you sweat at all. Again, our goal is to help you tell your story, your stories for each question. It's not to burn anyone.
Oh, so like 10 seconds would be reasonable.
10, 15, 20 seconds would be fine. And sometimes you're just going to have an initial reaction. And it depends on your communication style. And we realize that. Some people are just going to jump in and start talking before they've even thought. And some people are going to stop and think a while and formulate an answer. And we don't judge either because we know that people can be extroverted or introverted and both are good. Yeah.
If you are unsure how to answer a question, and can you say, can we come back to that question, or can you go to the next question?
We've had people do that. Yep, they'll usually take a crack at it. The applicant will usually take a crack at it, and if it's just not working well, sometimes they'll say, can we come back to it? Or even the interviewer will say, let's put that aside and move on and come back to that at the end. So that wouldn't be wrong. Again, there are standardized scoring guidelines at the bottom of each question, and they don't say anything like paused too long or wearing the wrong color suit or anything like that. We're looking at the specific answers to that question. Yeah.
And I guess for experiences, you're mostly looking for experiences we've had in college.
No, it could be your whole life. Yep. So we have second career people who've been stockbrokers or doctors or anything else, and they would be talking about that kind of thing. And we've got people who went straight through school, fast-tracked and are, quite young, 22, 23, and are already applying to vet school. And you're going to have different experiences, and we know that. So we're not judging you harshly that you've not been a stockbroker yet. So you're going to have different things to draw from your experience. So it could be about high school, it could be about college, it could be about extracurricular things, family things, anything that you can come up with that's about that. So think of this balancing competing demands question. That could be, you certainly do that as a college student, so that might be a natural thing that comes up, but maybe you've had a summer job where you really had to do a lot of that, or maybe you come from a family farm where you had to do a lot of that, or you helped raise your brothers and sisters, or it could be anything, and we don't prejudge what content area you're in.
All right.
Yeah.
How many people get interviews?
I would say 250 to 300 people. And, within that we are interviewing residents and non-residents. So, if you don't get, and if you have any specific questions anywhere along the line about your particular situation, any of us, it's usually Larry Bjorklund, our Director of Admissions, who handles those questions, but there are other people in the office who can help as well, can advise you in your particular situation. But if you don't get an interview, it's the two things that led to whether or not you got an interview were your academic stuff, so grade point average, GRE, and your experience, quote, personal characteristics. So we're looking for people with, again, experience with veterinarians and animals, experience with people, professional goals, leadership, extracurricular activities, balancing the academic load. And so we're looking at like your letters of reference and your application for that kind of stuff. And if you didn't make the interview cut, it just means you missed the cutoff because of one or both of those. And so for the next round, you would work on getting your academic scores up and or working on your experience, etc. Yeah.
Will they let you know what part of it
Yep.
that you missed? Okay.
Yep. Yep, we'll tell you. We can't, usually tell people there are some specific questions that we can't answer. So what, if I got an A in biochemistry, would that be enough for next year? We can't tell you that for sure, because next year will be a different pool of people, and where the cutoff will fall will be slightly different. But we can generally advise you that this is where you fell short this year, this is what you want to work on. And we do that all the time. Yeah.
Hi, I'm from the St. Paul Campus Career Center, and one of the things that we offer as a service to students are practice interviews that are behavioral based. So I didn't know if you had any opinion or feedback on the value of students actually having, not necessarily rehearsed, but having had some experience in a behavioral based interview prior to actually being in front of you.
Yeah. I have absolutely no data to tell me whether it helps or not in our particular circumstance, but my hunch is it would. My hunch is, if nothing else, it would help somebody feel more comfortable to go into that process, less nervous. Like, okay, now I can get a feel for what this is really like, and put their best foot forward. So it removes that one barrier of having this very novel situation. I don't know whether, other than removing that novelty, whether it helps, if it's something people can prepare for or can rehearse. I don't know. The people at PDI who helped us develop it tell us that, as a general rule, you're probably not going to be able to rehearse for that, because if a student or an applicant is trying to embellish or make the story sound better with behavioral probing, you quickly run astray. It's not the kind of thing where you can tell a lie and that's it. If someone's asking, and then what happened, and then what happened, it's pretty clear after a while that you're not. I don't know how often we experience people out and out lying, but certainly people exaggerate. I mean, that's human nature, and I don't know that it's in your best interest to do that, because we'll, through the probing, get through it. I'll use an example. When we were working towards implementing this, we had some veterinarians from the community come in and talk to our committee about it and learn about it. They were all very, very supportive of us doing it, but one of them volunteered to role play. And the consultant from PDI who was developing it, who was very skilled in behavior-based interviewing, was asking him about his experience with food animals, because he said he grew up on a dairy farm. And it became obvious very quickly that he had the advantage of having very fresh milk, but other than that probably didn't do much with this dairy. And he wasn't purposefully misleading. He just started out putting his best foot forward and saying, yeah, I grew up in a dairy farm and I this many head of cattle. But through probing, because he wasn't trying to lie, he hadn't done much with those cattle. Now, if he was lying, then it would look even worse, because he'd say something that didn't make any sense, and then the person would probe further and it would be awkward. But in his case, you quickly were able to see what was a superficial experience versus a deep knowledge of. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But I think it's great if the St. Paul Career Center can help with that. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Because again, it's one less thing to have to worry about. What is this going to be like? You've been through it before. You know kind of what to expect. The questions will probably be different, but going through the process, it's a different kind of process than most people have been through.
And if I could just add, obviously we would never, even if we knew the questions, we would never ask you the exact questions. But from my experience in working with students, sometimes when you're in that moment of feeling stressed and you're worried about the kinds of the 1 through 5, it's sometimes hard to remember your own experiences. So having actually worked through some of them and gotten some guidance on the essential parts to include and when to stop talking, it can be really helpful, so that you can think, oh yes, the time I helped Mr. So-and-so with such and such, or this experience I had in class, or this student group challenge or conflict that I worked through.
Yeah. I can imagine that. It's helping you put your best foot forward. It's not coaching you to be someone who you aren't. It's putting your best foot forward, and that's what we want you to do. We encourage you to put your best foot forward. We are not trying to stump you.